Let's bring in my next guest, trial lawyer Robert Barnes. Robert, thank you so much for joining us on the U.S. Report once again. Let's talk more about the Trump indictment. Asking everybody here tonight what your reaction, and I'm specifically interested in your reaction as a lawyer to these charges and the use of the Espionage Act to try and nail them.
I think there's deep constitutional problems with the indictment of the president that go beyond just the fact that he's the president. The fact that he's the former president raises issues under the impeachment clause, raises issues under the First Amendment for a particular kind of selective prosecution. We have never had in the American history one government indict the leading opponent of that government. That's happened in other countries. It's not been an American tradition. So all those raise unique constitutional questions, but there's additional constitutional questions just because he's the president, not just because he's the political opponent, which include under Article 2 provides the president has exclusive authority, is the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, makes all classification decisions. Under the Presidential Records Act, decides what is and isn't a presidential or personal record, and that's a non-reviewable decision by him. So there's this indictment threatens the independence and the democratic nature of the elected executive branch by putting the agencies above the president, putting unelected bureaucrats above the president. This indictment says that they can indict, the national security intelligence community can indict an elected president, even though they are unelected, if he merely discloses their secrets to the American people. I mean, this whole indictment starts, according to the indictment, because Trump outed the fact that General Milley wanted to wage wars that Trump did not want to wage. When we contrast this to the history of Bill Clinton and the sock drawer case, or either George W. Bush or Poppy Bush and what happened with documents that got destroyed from the prior administration or when they left, whether we talk about Hillary Clinton or email servers, whether we talk about Obama sticking records in a furniture store, when you look at this, it's not only major issues of selective prosecution, major issues as to whether we have a constitutional government, because the elected president is supposed to have final say about all these matters, not an unelected bureaucracy, least of all the elected president be indicted for challenging and questioning the power of that unelected bureaucracy.
Robert, I want to hone in on this issue because I think this is really important for people to understand. What you're telling me, tell me if I've got this right because I'm not a lawyer, but essentially you're saying that is if this case succeeds against Donald Trump, the law will no longer emanate from the president in terms of how documents are classified, but rather he will be controlled by this broader bureaucracy. Now, how would a future president, Democrat or Republican, say, be able to negotiate, talk to a foreign leader, whether they're friendly or an enemy, and negotiate with them and talk to them and deal with them if they have potentially this bureaucracy of agencies and national security types telling them this is okay, this isn't?
Effectively, this indictment tries to make the president the agent of the bureaucracy rather than the executive in control of the bureaucracy. And what it would do is, in the example you give, it would make the president have to get their permission first before he did any set of policies, before he announced any information, before he discussed or engaged in certain diplomatic engagements around the globe. He wouldn't be allowed to talk to the Russians to negotiate a peace deal in Ukraine. He wouldn't be allowed to talk to China to negotiate issues with North Korea or with Taiwan. He wouldn't be allowed to talk to Israel about Palestine without their permission first.
So, Robert, then what that would mean essentially is that you could have a president come in on a ticket of saying, we're going to do this with foreign policy, we're going to make America this way or that way or the other thing with foreign policy, diplomacy, trade, all of these issues, but still, I mean, this would be kind of almost a deep state coup, not to be conspiratorial about it.
Well, that's exactly what it would be. I mean, the deep state original was a doctrine originated by a publisher at The Economist, and it just means what happens when you have an unelected bureaucracy that has administrative power over law enforcement and national security. It got termed a deep state because of how deeply entrenched it is and because of how powerful that can be. If they can, I mean, we have that problem in the United States. People like Jesus Angleton was running around blackmailing members of Congress. When he was part of the CIA to broaden their budgets and expand their power. So we're back to that all over again. We have aspects of the intelligence community that thinks they should run American foreign policy. And the American people should not be bothered with it. The American people shouldn't get to determine that. Their elected president shouldn't get to dictate that. That they are the experts and they should run the show, and the president should just be their spokesperson. And if he ever challenges them, he goes to prison. That's the meaning of this indictment.
And when they're using the Espionage Act, which is a bit of a hangover from World War I, the language in the Espionage Act is very clear that it is about doing anything that goes against, and I think the exact words are, the interests of the United States of America. So if these guys, you know, the bureaucrats, the prosecutors, whomever, see Donald Trump being president as being against the interests of the United States of America, they will essentially stop at nothing, what you're saying, to stop him from being president again.
That's exactly what's going on. I mean, they're basically saying, because you challenged us, we're going to try to put you in prison for 400 years. And we're going to try to make sure you're never president again. Just like they handicapped his presidency with, as we now know from the Durham report, a bogus Russiagate investigation and smear campaign that might have prevented, had Trump had free reign, maybe we don't have this war with Ukraine. Maybe he would have found out a solution so this war doesn't exist. So these are real world consequences to the perilous precedents. People think it's about Trump. It's really about the power of the American people to control their own executive branch.
And finally, Robert, I can't let you go without asking you about the latest news out of the corruption cases that are brewing under the surface around the Bidens. Latest is that there was alleged coercion of a foreign national connected with Ukrainian energy firm Burisma to pay $10 million in bribes, according to individuals familiar with the investigation into the FBI's handling of the confidential human source report they have on that. What's the latest? And given everything we've just talked about, is this going to continue to be squelched because there's another agenda?
I mean, I think it will continue, sadly, to be squelched, but it does raise major questions about what we're doing right now in Ukraine in certain respects, because Ukraine keeps coming back to the centerpiece of the bribery allegations concerning Joe Biden and his son and other family members. And there's apparently, according to Senator Grassley, 17 tapes that record these conversations that even include then Vice President Biden being recorded on these tapes. It would fit the modus operandi. I mean, during the Ukrainian time frame, you had a lot of oligarchs that got a lot of their riches from government connections, from questionable banks. That was what Biden was put in charge of running after what some people call the Maidan coup, other people call the Maidan revolution. However you term it, there was a lot of free reign going on, a lot of investigations that got shut down. And after Biden gets involved, the Burisma investigation gets shut down, billions at stake in various forms of fraud. So $10 million bribe sounds almost reasonable, sadly. So it's very believable and credible that this occurred, given the history of Biden, given what we know about what was happening in Ukraine at the time, given the independent verification from third-party whistleblowers and apparently authenticated tapes, according to Senator Grassley, who hasn't been known to just spout anything. So it looks like we have systemic corruption with the Biden administration.
Well, we're going to have to leave it at that, but this is going to be one to run that we're going to have to keep a very close eye on. Robert Barnes, thank you so much for your time.